Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Mickey, and I'm one of the event coordinators at Diversified Insurance Solutions. I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Cyber Liability, Protecting Your Organization in the Digital World. Before I turn the mic over to the presenters, I want to quickly share a few webinar notes. First, everyone is currently muted in listen-only mode. This will help keep the webinar to meet our designated time frame. However, if at any time you do have a question throughout, feel free to type them in the question or chat box along the right-hand side of your screen. We have about 40 or so minutes of content and reserved time at the end to answer questions. If for some reason we aren't able to answer all the questions, we'll send out a Q&A and any other resource links within the next few days. Also, if you haven't already noticed, in the webinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen, we have included a copy of the presentation in the handout section that you can download or save if desired. Now I'd like to introduce today's webinar speakers, Katie Barnes, Tina Allen, and Karen Johnson, who are all on the Global Technology team at Travelers. Katie is an account executive and cyber specialist. She has 15 years of underwriting experience and is the cyber subject matter expert for the Central region. In addition, Katie underwrites multi-line middle market technology accounts. Tina has 25 years of insurance experience in underwriting and sales roles. She has been with Travelers for the past 7 years, helping Travelers become the market leader in cyber for the global technology industry. Karen is one of the managers of the Travelers Business Torts Claim Group, which is made up of 17 attorneys and experienced claim professionals. This group handles cyber first, intellectual property, medical products, bodily injury, and other complex commercial claims. Prior to joining Travelers 16 years ago, Karen was a litigation partner in a Minneapolis law firm. I'll now turn it over to this team for the presentation. Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome. Good morning. Please note the disclaimer. The material on these slides is coverages generally available in the marketplace and is not based specifically on Travelers' products. I'm going to introduce to you the cyber world, its exposures, possible damages resulting from the use of a computer, and look at some of the ways available to address these exposures today. The first thing we'll discuss is what is creating the need for cyber insurance. There are a number of factors. Regulatory environment, legal environment, media engagement, cyber crimes, all create challenges that impact businesses. Cybercrime is growing. Open the newspaper any day. Cybercrime is a criminal activity done using computers and the internet. This includes anything from downloading illegal music files to stealing millions of dollars from online bank accounts. Cybercrime also includes non-monetary offenses, such as creating and distributing viruses on other computers or posting confidential business information on the internet. Perhaps the most predominant form of cybercrime is a data breach, in which criminals use the internet to steal personal information from other users. One reference you may want to check out, which we'll provide in our resource document, is a website called privacyright.org. This provides a timeline of all recently reported breaches. Interconnectivity and data sharing between companies and individuals has exploded. All of our data is stored online. Think about what we do every day. We all have smartphones, use the web, have a credit card, shop online, bank online. Just think of all the activities that require your personal information, such as your name and address, online. This information is often shared among companies. It is out of your control, and this information is vulnerable to theft. Even if you aren't the one using the bank online or shopping online, your bank or your stores are doing so, and your information is online. One fact to share, currently in 2016, we had 6.4 billion devices connected to the internet. By 2020, it's expected to be 3 times that, over 20 billion. And the average household of 4 is expected to have 50 devices connected to the internet by 2020. Lots of different regulations, laws, and standards apply. These laws, regulations create a duty on the part of every business, big or small. Remember that it's not only laws and regulations that impact a business, but industry standards or contractual requirements can also create a duty. Breaches happen in a lot of different ways, both technical and non-technical. Often include and employ multiple approaches. Here are just a few ways online data may be compromised. Malware and hacking are the most common threats of action that we see. Phishing emails where a user clicks on a bad link, social media messaging, embedded links within software updates. One we see a lot is the Adobe Flash updates, which are sometimes not really a software update. They do include a malware embedded. The other item you guys may hear a lot about is social engineering. It plays a significant role in many of these types of events. Examples may include internal email received from the CFO to wire money, or somebody reaching out from HR asking for W-2 information to be released. Those are a couple common things that we've seen where hackers are able to compromise or create email addresses that look similar to internal email addresses and demand information from employees. Cyber threats come from different sources. For example, organized crime is more prone to targeting information they can resell. So it would make sense for finance, retail industries to be a target. They are targeting payment cards, bank account information, credentials to sell to others, and they are also after point-of-sale systems and databases to do so. Keep in mind, privacy is not the only threat to businesses as a result of cyber crime. Cyber criminals certainly are looking for personal, identifiable information and personal health information that they can exploit. Next, we will turn to why criminals are taking the data. The dollars above are the average black market prices of these kinds of information. This is from Dell SecureWorks report. It's about 2 years old, so this stuff is always changing. Other reports show healthcare records are worth 10 times the value of a credit card number. Healthcare information is more valuable because of the ability to commit insurance fraud with that information. Small and mid-sized firms are just as exposed to a data breach as large firms. It isn't about how big an organization is. It's about how they are protecting the data and how they are doing that. Small and mid-sized firms are just exposed to data breaches as large firms. Symantec's Internet Security Threat Report indicated that 34% of all targeted attacks were aimed at companies with less than 250 employees. State-of-the-art does not ensure security. The network infrastructure and systems are only as good as the last known threat. The term zero-day vulnerability means something that wasn't previously known as a vulnerability until that day it is discovered as the zero day. How many of you prior to December 2013 would have considered a company like Target, Home Depot to have been nothing less than state-of-the-art? The moral is any business can be a target, large or small, state-of-the-art or not. It's not a matter of will a breach occur, it's a matter of when. A cyber attack is just the beginning. It's what happens to the organization after that makes cyber insurance so valuable. It's not solely an IT issue. If you have employees, you have exposure. Employees are often the biggest threat to data security, either through losing paper records, mobile devices, or accidentally sending an email to the wrong email address, or an intentional act. IT is part of the solution, but only a must-have beginning. The IT security industry has now moved from more of a prevention focus, detecting and mitigating tactic. It's just a matter of time. In today's environment, it's not a matter of if a data breach will occur, but when it will occur. Do everything you can to prevent a data breach, but also fully plan out how you will respond. If you are breached, today's media and business environment demands a two-pronged approach, a breach response plan. Employees are the leading cause of data breaches, but if a hacker sees a vulnerability, they will get in and the losses are much larger. Most breaches are opportunistic and not targeted. The victim is specifically targeted. They were identified and attacked because they exhibited a weakness and the hacker knew how to exploit it. In other words, this can happen to anyone. Most companies don't expect that they will be a target, but hackers find it relatively quick and easy to penetrate most secure networks, and being opportunistic, they go after anyone that is vulnerable. It's not that easy. The company is ultimately responsible. Laws generally consider the company, not the vendor, to be the stewards of sensitive data. Many cloud hosting firms also believe their customer contracts push liability for data breaches back to their customers. A breach may impact a large number of vendors' clients. An example is the Anthem data breach. Businesses are outsourcing many of their IT needs or other business functions, all leading to data sharing or at least data exposure. Most businesses are looking to a third-party vendor for various reasons, including moving more information to a cloud environment. Social media, consider the explosion of social media in the business world, how it impacts your business. Many businesses use Facebook to promote their business and typically have procedures for managing that business perspective. But employees can expose data in ways that initially may appear to be secure. But for example, they post a picture where I work or a state that I work at Travelers, not a big deal, right? All this information, the hackers can start to compile the data. They can figure out where people work, determine who works there, who's the boss, and compile a phishing scheme to get to your data. Even if the data is outsourced, the company is still obligated to keep that information confidential and has a liability if it is not. If you think coverage is expensive, try dealing with a security breach. This is one about the numbers. When the event happens, whether it's defending yourself in litigation over a blog post or litigation over failing to prevent unauthorized access to information you were responsible for protecting, and the cost associated with managing some of that type of privacy breach event, from forensic to notification to business interruption. Let's take a look at some of the costs that may be incurred as a result of a data breach. Cost per compromised record can be staggering when thousands of records are compromised. Studies don't include breaches in an excess of 100,000. Records are not representative of the most breaches will skew the results. The average dollar here of $217 per record, that's a cost per record. And this is from 2014. I know this goes up on a monthly basis. Average breach claim costs. These studies use actual cyber-related claim reported by insurers, but this is always changing. Travelers eRisk Hub, we provide a breach calculator based on the number of records you may hold. We can determine an estimated cost a potential breach could cost you. Organizations may choose or be required to offer ongoing credit monitoring services to help determine whether financial damage has been done as a result of the breach. The company may also be required to absorb additional costs to individuals that result from the breach. And none of this has even touched the legal liability issue, defending the class action litigation or other litigation that arises. So when you say you can't afford coverage, the question is, how can you not afford to have coverage? So to recap the key points so far, most companies will face associated costs with determining what happened and where and what impact it will be to their business. Included with these costs are compensation to third parties, such as credit monitoring, to help manage the potential identity theft down the road. In addition to the costs shown in the prior slide, there can also be costs to third parties associated with litigation. Let's talk about cyber coverage, what cyber coverage is available. Here are some first-party costs that may arise from a data breach that would not typically be covered any other way. These are direct costs associated with investigating and responding to a breach. If you think back to our early conversation, a company can spend a lot of time and money prior to the legal issues or lawsuit. Most cyber policies include a significant amount of limits for first-party reimbursement costs. Two areas to start thinking about are the coverage triggers. What has happened to cause the loss, and will it be covered? And what type of data is included in the coverage? Some policies, for example, focus on the private or health information and may not cover the insured's liability for failing to protect the data of others. Does the data have to reside on their system or be connected to a network? If a laptop is stolen from a car, is it connected to the network? While cyber policies in the marketplace are robust, there is no standardization. Not all policies are created equal, and it usually is pretty easy to determine what is covered. However, we cannot forget to dig a bit deeper to determine where limitations to coverage may apply. and these will vary significantly from one carrier to the next based on their specific appetite. Some that can be especially challenging are exclusions aimed at adherence to best practices. For example, maintaining updated network security, including patches. This often is not feasible or realistic. Network security is often only as good as the last known threat. Coverage examples. These are just examples exploring the general coverage intent to illustrate the difference between what may exist between various coverages. A lost paper record. While this scenario deals with the manufacturer, it's more important to note that any company faces this exposure. Third parties discover a data breach is very common. According to TrustWave's last security report, only 19% of data breaches are self-discovered. The other 81% are discovered by law enforcement, regulatory bodies, card brands, merchant banks, consumers, and others. So in this case, the personnel files of 298 employees were accessed because of a box that was being transported to a storage facility. Small incidents can have a large financial impact. A data breach involving even small number of records is expensive due to the costs associated with forensics, legal services, and public relations. This event of 298 lost records is estimated to have cost the manufacturer $215,000. In our example, the cost of the breach was $250,000. Although this is quite a large number, to mid-sized businesses, it's relatively a small incident compared to the average cost of a data breach. On average, a data breach can expose 28,000 records, and according to data obtained from Net Diligence, which is another organization that does studies on cyber data, the average total cost of a similar incident could be over $1.7 million. Legal and regulatory environments have changed significantly and continue to evolve at a rapid pace. One of the first laws that really started the trend for notification of personal identifiable information was a breach that came out in California. Today, now 47 states have notification laws. And don't forget, regulatory legislation outside of the United States can also affect your responsibility. For example, a recent change in the U.S. for Florida in 2014, Information Protection Act, this was the first state to have statutory penalty for failing to notify in compliance with the statute. The civil penalties are $1,000 per day after 30-day notification period ends. And for any after that 30-day, it's $50,000. And for anything that continues more than 180 days, up to a $500,000 fine. So lost paper record, according to a recent study that are prepared with an incident response team and plan experience lower per record breach costs. So create, implement, and test an incident response plan or breach response plan. Our next example, hack of a retailer. The company is a local retailer with $30 million in revenue. A credit card company identified 50,000 credit cards used legitimately at an insured's retail location were subsequently compromised. The credit card company notified the merchant that its common point of purchase for the card fraud. Under the payment card industry PCI agreement, the merchant was required to investigate. One thing to note here, if credit cards are accepted for any goods or services by you, you are required to be compliant with the PCI or payment card industry standards. It's not just retailers. The credit card company alleged a breach occurred as a result of a hack within the retailer's point-of-sale system and is requiring the retailer to undergo a forensic audit by a certified forensic investigator and its systems and related infrastructure. The investigation, in fact, revealed the breach of 50,000 customer cards. An attorney was hired to serve as a breach coach, and after the investigation and notifying victims, a class action lawsuit was also brought. A data breach involving PCI can be expensive due to the costs associated with investigation, forensics, and legal services. This event of 50,000 records is estimated to have cost the retailer $2.5 million, according to the net diligence breach calculator. It is important to note the motivation behind the crime like this, that the credit card data is worth $4 to $8 per credential in the black market, as we referenced in an earlier slide. In our example, the total cost of the breach was $2.5 million. This is a very large expense for a local retailer, but again, in comparison to some PCI hack events, relatively small. Average cost of a similar event could be close to $6 million. So let's review some of the PCI compliance actions. If there is a breach, a PCI compliant entity needs to use one of the 12 PFIs or PCI forensic investigators. Payment card brands can fine an acquiring bank $5,000 to $100,000 per month for non-compliance with PCI. These fees are passed down the line and eventually hit the merchant. The bank will either terminate its relationship with the merchant or increase transaction fees. This demonstrates the number of transactions annually that dictate what PCI level you or other companies are subject to. Maintaining and frequently reviewing compliance obligations under the payment card agreement. Consider implementing end-to-end encryption of credit card transactions. Employ a Chief Information Security Officer to develop and implement your business-wide data security privacy procedures. The retail industry continues to have issues. The largest number of these records exposed. I know a lot of people now are seeing the chip. As of October 1st, 2015, there is a liability shift from the card brand to the merchant for the value of fraudulent credit card transactions. This is not a PCI requirement, but rather imposed by card brands, MasterCard, Visa, and other payment card processors. How risk is assessed for this coverage? We look at a number of different exposures when evaluating risk. There are some that are often considered and should be to help you and your agent through this issue. Whose information do you have? Think about every individual that you interact with, your client firms, your vendors, data or transactions, even your employee information. How sensitive is that information? Does your client have any individual personal information? Is there intellectual property information of other businesses? And what is the state and county breach notification laws that you or your clients are subject to? Collection and protection and social media. These are all factors that you need to consider. Exposure evaluation. What is the number of sensitive records that your firm has control or access to? Although there is no direct correlation between the number of records and the possibility of a breach or cost of breach, it can be a starting point to determining the potential impact. Think back to the per record number shared. I think it was about $217 per record. Do you integrate your systems or establish links or connections with outside parties for purposes of transferring data? And even if you use email, that's another way to leak information. Do outside parties rely on your website systems to perform critical functions? Could a third party suffer a loss of income or incur extra expense due to the inability to access your system or your website? In addition to reviewing exposures, we will also look at what companies are doing to manage their exposure to mitigate loss. Again, these can provide a guide for all of us to consider when we are talking with customers and their exposures. We've talked about cybercrime being a matter of when and not if. Determined hackers will probably be able to penetrate an organization's firewall and security measures, but there are a number of best practices that will make it harder for hackers and reduce the risk of these intrusions. This is no different than any other disaster recovery or business continuity plan. Organizations like yourself need to have procedures and programs in place to manage network events, privacy events, and intellectual property. If you had an if you as a business were located on the coast and could be hit by a hurricane, you would have a plan in place. This should be no different.
Okay, thank you, Katie. At this time, we'll open it up to some questions. I did see a couple already come through. That questions box is located along the right-hand side of your screen. You'll just open up, you'll press the plus sign and open up that box and can type those in. We'll give about 20 seconds and we'll come back to questions. Also, the handout is available along the right-hand side too. You can download or save that, print that copy if you would like. So again, please feel free to type in some questions and we will start going through those in just a second. Thank you. Okay, so as mentioned, Katie's here from Travelers. We also have Karen and Tina on the line to help walk through some answers to questions, if applicable. So the first question that came in was, doesn't my general liability policy cover me for cyber cases?
So the general liability, as of 2015, ISO, who is the standard form for general liability policies, has now added an exclusion for any private or personal identifiable information. So this clearly now has separated our GL coverage from the data breach or exposure of private personal identifiable information, creating the need to have this unique coverage to respond.
And this is Karen Johnson in claim. So just to elaborate on that a little bit more, even prior to the ISO exclusion being added and carriers adopting that if they have their own proprietary forms, the GL policy was never intended to respond to data breaches. And if you read the policy, it responds in the personal injury section. It's got certain privacy coverage, but that involves the policyholder either publicizing or making known private information of others. And in your data breach or hack situation, it's not like the policyholder is making anything known. It's being stolen and being made known by third parties if it's made known at all. So, a CGL policy has never responded to data breaches. That's never been the intent. And even more important, that's all third-party liability. So in the event that you as a policyholder suffer a breach and have to, start going down the road that, we were discussing earlier about investigating, notifying, dealing with regulators, those sort of things, those are first-party expenses that, would never, ever, ever be covered under a third-party CGL. So all of those things kind of put together really drive home the need for specialized cyber coverage in this day and age.
Oh, thank you, Karen. Another question that came in is, what do insurers require in terms of process, procedure, control, etc., in order to secure cyber liability coverage? And then also on the flip side, what resources do carriers offer to help develop the same?
So to secure a cyber liability coverage, we do have an application where we're going to ask for information about your business and what you're doing to contractually protect yourself. But we do understand that this is a work in progress for everybody. So really to secure coverage, we look at what your total revenues are from a traveler's perspective, what data information you have, and we partner with your agent to look to provide options for you for cyber coverage. On the flip side, we have many resources. When we go out, typically in middle market, we will send out someone to do a risk control survey. But even for our smaller businesses, we have a dedicated engineer that can help do a review of your business practices. eRisk Hub, when you are a policyholder, even prior to, we have roadmaps and other best practices that we're more than willing to share through this process so you can be more aware of what you need to do to protect yourself.
And don't we have like the pressure test?
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. We have a questionnaire that can be taken by anyone within the organization that asks you a series of questions so you can understand where your vulnerabilities are at. And that's something we can definitely share with Diversified and the team. It's a good starting point for you to just kind of see where maybe your weak points are.
Okay, thank you. It looks like we had one more question come in. What are our state's privacy notification laws, fines, and penalties?
All right, and I understand the audience is in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Minnesota. Now, I don't pretend to be versed in every state's notification laws. In fact, although I'm a lawyer, now that I'm inside in claim, I can't even give that sort of legal advice. But that's why it's so important in a breach situation to involve one of our breach coaches right out of the gate, because the breach notification laws, vary from state to state. We just dealt with a breach, actually it was in Iowa, where we ended up with customers in our database from 6 different states, all of which had different notification obligations, which meant we had to craft 6 different letters because they had to say different things depending on the specific state. So rather than try to summarize it all in a sentence or two, I would say that the key thing to know with respect to that is, as you're planning your privacy policies, that's an important question to discuss with an attorney as you're drafting those policies. And if you suspect any sort of breach activity or any sort of compromise, it's really important to get a breach coach involved right out of the gate.
And just a note, this is Katie. As a policyholder, a breach coach, you do get an initial breach coach consultation included as a policyholder. There is a website, ncsl.org. It is a place where all the security data breach laws, it's a database where you can look at that. It's also e-risk hub on every policy. There's a link within that you can reference, but again, you know, we suggest you refer and discuss with your agent and legal counsel, but it's something to definitely consider as our footprint can go across multiple jurisdictions, businesses, you know, with your data.
Okay. Looks like that was all the questions that came in for right now.
Can I make one point just as a word of warning from claim here?
Yeah.
Last year at this time, I mean, it's tax season, and last year at this time we saw a huge uptick in phishing emails sent out by bad guys. The website or the email address appears to mimic an internal company email address. They usually hit up someone in HR. It usually purports to be from someone in senior leadership whose authority would not be questioned, and the senior leader requests that the HR person send him in a zip file all of the W-2s for, you know, all of the employees or all of the companies in a particular division or something like that. And people, instead of checking, instead of calling the purported sender of the email and saying, you know, CEO Mike, did you really want me to send you 2,000 W-2s? They just zip it and send it. And that's a breach. That's a big breach, and those bad guys are using that information to promptly file fraudulent tax returns, and it creates just a whole big mess. Now, we thought we'd get through that once. There were warnings put out about it last year. We thought people would kind of get it. It's happening again. In the past 2 weeks, we've probably, through the organization, through our breach coaches, we've probably seen at least 15 calls come in where people have fallen victim to the same thing. So that's just your handy tip for the day. Share that information within your organizations.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen. So final conclusion, information security risks and data breaches and identity fraud, it's not disappearing. It's not a disappearing trend. Attacks are becoming more complex in nature. Legislation and contractual requirements have added to the complexity of managing cyber threats. Privacy.org, the one website I told you guys about too, I mean, in 2017 already there was 6 breaches that were recorded, and the first one was a lost laptop, which can happen to anyone, and that, you know, that's a real thing that we also, our policies can help respond to.
And just remember that insurance is just one tool of the business that you can use to manage your risk, but really rely on your legal staff and your agent at Diversified to assist you.
Well, thank you, ladies, and on behalf of Diversified and Travelers, thank you to the audience for joining the program today. Just a reminder, a recording of the webinar is available on the Diversified website, www.div-ins.com, under that library tab in the video section. If you do have additional questions that come to mind after the program, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the screen as well as in the presentation. If you have interest in learning more about Travelers and some of the products and services they offer, again, please feel free to reach out to me and I can help facilitate that. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you again.